Hello and welcome to the section for volunteers. In this video, you will learn what is expected from you as a volunteer working with elderly people and what your rights are. You will also receive some practical advice on dealing with older victims of abuse and cooperating with the staff in your organization. As you have learned during the previous lectures, older people face many challenges which come hand in hand with the process of aging. But arising physical limitations and changes in cognitive function do not necessarily cross out everything that an older person can bring to the society. That is why volunteering with older persons offers a good opportunity to make a valuable personal connection. Volunteering brings various benefits, including new skills, contacts, and experience that can be useful in your future career. Giving to others can also help your mental health by reducing stress and providing a sense of meaning. Social care organizations and community only benefit from volunteer help, so you are doing the work which is needed and valued. It is important, however, to provide volunteers with adequate training, guidance, and support. In every organization, there should be a volunteer coordinator who is helping them to succeed in their role. Coordinator should ensure the following core principles. First of all, every person should want to do volunteer work out of their free will and not because they have to. Volunteering is an unpaid service, and volunteers should be driven by a sincere will to help older people and their families. Secondly, volunteer is not expected to be a professional. The role of a volunteer is to act as a human being and share real emotions with their client. Every volunteer brings their own life history, personality, knowledge, and understanding to the services they do. A volunteer should not be considered as a replacement for the professional. Another important principle is commitment. Volunteers should estimate their own resources so that they will not promise to do more work than they actually can. Next principle concerns tolerance. Everyone should be treated equally, no matter of their background, ethnicity, race, religion, sexuality, and other identity factors. And the last principle is impartiality. Volunteers' role is to listen and support the older person to make their own decision. Volunteers are not allowed to make decisions on behalf of older people. Volunteering with older persons who may have experienced abuse requires full confidentiality. Maintaining confidentiality means behaving in a way that protects the client's privacy, identity, and dignity. Confidentiality is also an important part of developing trust in a care relationship. Volunteers commit to confidentiality, which does not end when volunteering does. Volunteers should also have the right to receive professional guidance and counseling for discussing challenging experiences and feelings. Volunteers have the right to be assigned with appropriate and meaningful tasks, be provided with adequate information, training, and assistance, receive an effective supervision and feedback, be respected for their skills, dignity, and individuality, have their feedback and suggestions respectfully heard, have a recognition of their contribution, have confidentiality of their personal volunteer file protected except for the purposes of supervision. Volunteers have the responsibility to perform volunteer duties to the best of their ability and in the best interest of the older person. Follow directions and guidelines of their host organization. Meet time commitments. Inform their supervisor if they suspect any kind of abuse or are concerned about an older person's well-being. Adhere to the organization's rules and procedures. Attend orientation course for volunteers as well as relevant trainings and counseling sessions. Welcome supervision and be willing to learn. Ask questions, be open-minded and non-judgmental. Due to the fact that elder abuse is a taboo topic, it is often challenging for older people to discuss it even if they are suffering from violence. It may take time for the older person to learn to trust you before they can open up. Sometimes the emotions are still too strong for them to share this experience with anybody else. You may need to reassure the older person that any conversation you have with them will not be discussed with their spouse, partner, or other member of their family without their consent. When disclosing abuse or neglect, an older person may experience a range of emotions, such as guilt. Victims often blame themselves for the abuse and may feel guilty for telling someone about it. This is usually the case when the abuser is the older person's child or grandchild. The older person may feel that they have failed as a parent or a grandparent and deserve the poor treatment. Shame. Older people are often ashamed of the abuse itself, particularly if it is sexual abuse. Fear. Older persons may fear the perpetrator, that the abuse may reoccur, or that disclosing the violence will cause conflicts in the family. They may also be fearful of the consequences for the perpetrator, for example, jail. Sometimes older people fear to be forced to live in a residential facility and don't report abuse that is done by family members or private caregivers, as they don't want to be moved away of their home surroundings. As a volunteer, it is important to remember that it is never your responsibility to do the investigation and find out if the abuse is in fact taking place. This is the duty of the professionals. It is better to avoid asking too many questions about the potential abuse, as it can provoke challenging emotions. Your role as a volunteer is highly significant itself. You listen to and provide support to the older person. But even though it is expected to respect older person's right to confidentiality, there are some exceptions. Health and social care professionals have a duty to report cases of elder abuse, so it is important to let them know of any suspicions you may have about the health or safety of an older person. As it was mentioned already, it is not your responsibility to determine if the abuse is in fact taking place, but you have to alert your supervisor and share your concerns so that professionals can intervene and, if necessary, report the suspected abuse. You can tell the older person that you must discuss it with your coordinator because you care about them and because you are concerned with their health and safety. Never promise to keep it as a secret. This especially includes the situations where an older person admits that they have been thinking about committing a suicide. Now we will go through the do's and don'ts when an older person discloses abuse. Don't ignore or diminish their experiences. Don't blame the older person for what has happened. Do not share general advice. Do not deal with the situation behind the older person's back. Don't break trust. Inform the older person about your obligation to share the matter with a supervisor. Don't be left alone with the matter. Immediately talk to your coordinator. Always listen, ask, and talk directly to the older person. Make sure that the conversation feels safe and respectful for the older person. Tell the older person that the treatment they have experienced is wrong. Judge actions, not people. Discuss with the older person how to seek help and create together a safety plan for threatening situations. Assess the risks. What happens if you don't do anything? Will the older person be in an imminent danger? Encourage, motivate, be supportive and trustworthy. Thank you for watching today's video. I hope it was useful and you will now know how to implement these principles in your volunteer work.